Channel. It's Friday. It's the 25th of February 2022. I just realized it's my stepfather's birthday. As I said, the 25th of February, I was like, I need to send a text. Happy birthday, stepfather. Hopefully you can spend a couple of hours with us this morning. We've got lots to talk about, lots happening, across this wonderful country and across the rest of the wider world, of course. So we're going to look at all of that together and try and get our heads around some of the complexities of being at war when you're kind of not at war. Do you know what I mean? This is what's so confusing about this. People don't quite understand whether it's America or if it's NATO or if it's who it is. So we'll just talk about that a little bit as well. We're going to look through the morning papers together, find out what's happening. Also, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman selected for the nation's top court. She's long been considered the leading contender for the post. We'll take a look at her determined journey. Also, ex-police officers guilty in the George Floyd death. We'll look at that as well and find out why two of them held him down and one of them just tried to stop passers-by from intervening. Shocking. But at least justice was done yesterday. And finally, Congress wants to go further for Ukraine. We'll ask, is it too late? And also, the Black History Month continues. Groundbreaking Olympic sportswoman Alice Coachman is our star today. So all of that to look at together here on Backchannel. This is the Anthony Davis Show. You can message me via the usual way, backchannel.tv, or you can go with your Echo show, have a little conversation, wake it up, say, and then your message. That's kind of how it works. Easy. And if in the meantime you want to spend any time with us, as in like get into the show, be part of the show, communicate with the show, then be my guest. It's an absolutely complete open forum here, okay? Knock yourself out. Okay, let's jump into some of the morning newspapers. We're going to start with the News Herald this morning for Arizona. Senate OK state funds for border wall. Unbelievable. It's almost as if in these red states, they're just kind of carrying on as if Trump was still the president, with their own isolationist policies. It says Republican lawmakers are ready to use state funds to build a wall along the border with Mexico. The only question that remains is how much they're willing to spend. On Wednesday, the Senate voted 6-12 to allocate $700 million to administer and manage the construction of a physical border fence. Only thing is, the critical 16th vote for SB 1032 came from Senator Tyler Pace, and he made it very clear while he supports the concept, he won't vote for a final budget that includes an allocation that large. That would be a misuse of state funds, he said. So, that in turn leaves the question of how much is acceptable. On Thursday, the House voted 31-28 for an identical bill, but with just $150 million. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to get for that. I mean, just makes me so sad that, because this is just men, isn't it? It's like men, big cars, big trucks, big walls. Build it big. Show of strength. Statistically and scientifically, based on all the data, you are more likely to be able to curb immigration with technology than with a physical border fence. They've done all these studies. The tech is so advanced now in terms of processing people and identifying people. You don't need a physical wall. It can all be done with technology. I also think about the wildlife. Carla, you ever thought about this? Like migrating animals? Animals that normally would be moving across the Great Plains, as they go from one place to another. Yeah, think about it all the time. Animals literally cannot get beyond the border wall. Whether I don't know what kind of animals are there. I don't know enough about that area, but I am aware of the fact that there are plenty of animals that can't fly. Big animals that can't fly, that need to go to find water. You imagine if an animal walks, crawls, drags itself, and there's water on the other side of that wall. Can't get to it. So, and there has been studies done about migration with the border wall, animal migration with the border wall, not just human migration. And so it is very interesting, something that I have, thought about momentarily, I'll give you that. You spend so much time focusing on humans and the movement of human people, you kind of forget that there are animals that also need to migrate. They probably call them illegal animals, like they call humans illegal aliens. So offensive. Republicans helped defeat Arizona abortion pill ban. One Republican in the Arizona House defected from a united GOP front on Thursday to defeat a measure that would have banned manufacturing or prescribing medication that would cause an abortion. The bill that unexpectedly failed would have eliminated the choice used by half of the people who have abortions in the state, leaving a surgical procedure as the only option. Yeah, did you know this? It's very interesting. I was reading about it yesterday, that 50% of all abortions that are carried out in the United States are done with a pill. It's not a invasive surgery. It's just done with a pill. And so, of course, they want to ban the pill now as well. The bill that unexpectedly failed would have eliminated the choice used by half the people who have abortions in the state. Members, I am about as pro-life as they come, Representative Michelle Udall of Mesa said as she joined all Democrats in voting against the measure. However, in my research of some of these medications, they are used for other purposes as well. They're used for women who have a miscarriage. They're also used to treat Cushing's syndrome, and they have other uses, she said. And so to criminalize making these medications and using them will hurt other people. Also on the front of the News Herald this morning, PwC endurance race ready for splashdown in it's 18th year. This some kind of crazy horse campground water sports event. It's the longest personal watercraft endurance race in the world, actually. It's returning to Lake Havasu City this weekend. So, something to look forward to. I've only once been to something like that. I went to a Red Bull air race once. You remember the Air Bull air race? Where the little planes do aerobatics and chase each other and do speed records through a course. I went to one of those once, and it was kind of amazing. But I've maybe 2 or 3 times in my life have I gone to a competitive sports crowd, audience sitting watching a thing. I think I've been to 2 football matches when I was a child, soccer matches in England. I've been to 1 Paralympics, but that was an opening ceremony. It wasn't any sports. And I've been to the Red Bull air race. Never been to a football game. Never been anywhere where there's been a sport thing happening and people watching. Just never occurred to me to go to something like that. Is that weird? It just never occurred to me. I've been to the ballet plenty of times. Been to see a whole lot of shows. I've been to see concerts. I can't even count how many wonderful concerts I've seen. Best concert I saw was Paul Simon at the Hollywood Bowl. Man, that was a good concert. Everybody was so high. Everybody was stacked. It was really beautiful. The sun was the moon was rising, the sun was going down. It just was what a perfect night to listen to Paul Simon singing. The Paul Simon back catalogue just blows my mind. I forget how many great songs there are. And I was listening to Kate Bush on the radio yesterday. I think Kate Bush might be one of the single greatest exports from the United Kingdom. If you haven't come across Kate Bush, I was listening to a guy being interviewed. He's like a R&B guy, and he'd covered a Kate Bush song, and it had changed his life and his career. And it was just really interesting. Kate Bush basically wrote she's like a prodigy, like a child prodigy. She wrote some of the greatest songs ever written at the age of 14, 15, 16, 17. And she was discovered by one of the guys from Pink Floyd. He discovered her and kind of gave her this record contract. And the rest is history. I mean, just like the back catalogue, Kate Bush's back catalogue is just incredible. It's incredible. And she was a child. And she was singing songs, writing lyrics like she was a mature woman who'd lived a whole lifetime. She wrote a song called The Man with a Child in His Eyes. Just think about that as a title, as a lyric. The man with a child in his eyes. She was on another level. There's something wonderful about gifted humans, right? Whether it be sports people or musicians or artists, people who have a gift. Hers was a gift. She didn't learn this. She's too young to learn it. It was a gift. It's just beautiful. And I really feel the reason that I'm kind of digressing like this today is because I've been feeling so sad with the military action in Ukraine. I've literally been clamoring for positive thoughts to try and, weather this period of uncertainty. And I've also been very moved at Volodymyr Zelensky. I've learned how to say his name, by the way. Volodymyr. I was doing Volodymyr. You've got to pronounce the V. Volodymyr Zelensky. What an amazing man. Considering his background was in comedy and acting, it's like a stand-up. Now leading an entire nation, giving them hope, standing strong, remaining in Kiev despite the fact that it's being shelled all the time. It's very likely that Volodymyr Zelensky could lose his life, and he knows it. He absolutely knows it. I was reading today about Putin. Carl, I don't know if you know this. He became obsessed with the killing and the humiliating killing of Colonel Gaddafi. The way that Gaddafi died, and he was paraded as a corpse. It was a very kind of horrific death. And apparently Putin was so shocked by this, the idea that he could end up like Gaddafi, that he apparently watched the video over and over again of the death of Muammar Gaddafi. Amazing, really. What goes through the minds of these dictators and how they want to be portrayed and how they want to be remembered and how they don't want to, and also to kind of feel some kind of allegiance with other dictators. Because Gaddafi was not a good person. Oh, Kenneth, good morning. Kenneth, first time on the show. He's saying, how are you? I'm very well. Thank you very much, Kenneth. Very well. Spencer, good morning. Anthony, Bobby, Stacy, Michael, Oliver, welcome to Backchannel. Just talking about light stuff, like the death of Colonel Gaddafi. Okay, well, let's jump back into the newspapers this morning. We're having a good old look. Arizona Republic this morning. They lead with brutal act of war. President says Putin faces consequences for assault. International condemnation rained down on Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday as his brutal, overwhelming invasion left a trail of death and destruction across Ukraine that global leaders had warned about for weeks. The attack threatened to create global upheaval and escalate into the largest military conflict on European soil since the end of World War II. I watched a video this morning which I wish I hadn't seen of a Russian tank driving over a civilian vehicle in Ukraine. The tank swerved. It was a single little car driving on its own. Tanks coming towards it. Tank swerves to drive over it. It was an old man driving the car. And it was filmed from multiple angles, and I watched it one time, and just made me feel very, very, very sad that they would do that, because of course they're claiming they're only going to hit military targets. And to have a tank drive over a car, literally just consumed the car. And what must be going through the minds of the Russians who are driving that tank? What kind of mindset are they in if they think that that's okay? How has Putin riled them up? How do they feel about the Ukrainian people if they are choosing to just drive over one of them in their tank? Beckett, welcome to the show as well. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Representative Ruben Gallego argued this week that the United States should, in conjunction with NATO, help Ukraine against Russia in order to protect U.S. national security and maintain moral standing as the world's superpower. It says hours before Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Gallego advocated for Biden to send military aid to Kiev and troops to neighboring NATO countries, in addition to imposing economic sanctions on Russia. Well, I don't know if that's the right move right now, I'll be honest. I think that Putin... That's what Putin would like Biden to do, just to escalate this very quickly. And I have a feeling that would be the wrong thing. I actually think that Blinken has played a blinder with this, contrary to all of the right-wing media and the far-right, Republican criticism. I think that Putin is going to struggle here. And I think that Biden and Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, have done a really very clever maneuvers here. It's very subtle. It's all about getting the international community on board, because NATO's a lot of 24 countries. So it's like, any of them could have a different idea. And then Biden seems to have kept them all together. Arizona Daily Star, Furious West aims to make Moscow pay a heavy price, it says. World leaders on Thursday reacted to Russia's invasion with raw outrage and vows of unprecedented sanctions that shrouded a sense of powerlessness to defend Ukraine military without running the risk of a wider war in Europe, is the headline. Also, Arizona sets to pour funds into border wall, as we discussed, and finally, vaccination drive in US appears to bottom out. So that's the Arizona Daily Star for this Friday morning. The Time Standard now for California. They lead with Russia invades Ukraine on many fronts. That's right. Unleashing airstrikes on cities and military bases and sending in troops and tanks from three sides in an attack that could rewrite the global post-Cold War security order. Fentanyl continues to plague county, is the headline. Drug Task Force says spike in overdoses is really scary. That's Humboldt County. And Maguire bill proposes relief on pot taxes. State lawmakers push legislation offering relief. There it is. Okay. Next up is the Fresno Bee. Let's take a look at that. Russia attacks Ukraine on multiple fronts, also on the front of the Fresno. Same story, actually. Fresno gas prices rise amid crisis in Ukraine. I mean, look, gas prices are going to go through the roof now, and I think we just have to be prepared for that. And for those of us that didn't switch to electric cars when we were told to, more fool us. But that's the reality, is that gas prices are going to rise. And personally, I think for the sake of Ukraine, it's worth it. Because we all have to do our little bit. And if paying a little extra at the pump is what we have to do to bring stability to Northern Europe, then so be it. Eastern Europe, I should say. Clovis schools end mask rules for students and teachers. Yes, today is like the day the mask thing stops here in America. Today they're basically saying you don't have to wear a mask anymore, which I am simply not going to follow. And when I was in the store yesterday, I went to Trader Joe yesterday to buy a plant, because I'm the only one who buys plants in Trader Joe. Everyone was wearing a mask. Not a single solitary person not wearing a mask. Carla, are they still wearing masks in shops in London? Do you have to wear a mask to go into a shop? Wow. I mean, public transport is where you should be wearing a mask, isn't it? Yeah. London's kind of given up on the whole mask thing, I think. It's just tired of it. I actually really like a mask, I actually feel like that's part of my character now. It's who I am. I'm like I'm like Zorro, just like Zorro. Just call me like lower face Zorro rather than upper face. And also, if you're wearing a mask, you don't have to worry too much about, have I shaved my beard, or do I need to wear a lipstick, or, it's just a bit more chill. My Hatchimals has joined us. Thank you very much. Good morning. Stacey's having pizza and chips and a cup of tea. Lovely. Lovely. Okay, on to the Visalia Times. Never had this one before. The Visalia Times Delta. Lovely. Headline, under attack, Biden and world leaders strongly condemn Putin's actions, oil prices, markets roiled. Hey, here's something interesting, Carla. I don't know if you noticed this. Carla's the producer, by the way. I'm just talking to her, but I'm also talking to you. She's here and you're here. We're just chatting together. I have not heard Biden or Secretary Antony Blinken, for that matter, ask Putin to stop. I've heard them say we're imposing sanctions. I've heard them say that it's a brutal regime. I've heard him, condemn and all of this stuff. But I have not heard either of them in a single announcement or statement or speech say the words, withdraw your troops now, retreat now, stop fighting now. Well, this is what I'm saying. It's interesting. Carla says it's because it's fighting talk, and she's right. That is the reality of this. It's like and this is why the people who are critical of Biden don't understand the fine tightrope that he is walking right now, And so his language is so important at this stage to not inflame the fighting. Because Putin is basically waiting for some threats to respond to, isn't he? I mean, if Trump was president, Trump is claiming that if he was president, this wouldn't have happened, Trying to take all the credit for the fact that he had Putin in the palm of his hand, and it was, of course, the other way round. But Trump is going on TV every day, mainly phoning in. He doesn't appear in person because, visually he's quite insecure. But he's phoning into all the channels all the time, to the point that they literally can we get rid of this guy? And the stuff he's saying just doesn't make any sense. No sense. He just has no concept of what the world is like in reality. And this is my biggest fear, is that, this alternative reality that Trump and his fans and supporters are living in makes total sense to them. Makes total sense. And to say it is so far from my reality, or the reality of people who are educated in this subject, as in well read, not academically, but just with it, on it, care. Maybe that's the issue, people like him, they just fundamentally don't really care, so they can say anything. They don't really care. Biden condemned the unprovoked and unjustified attack and vowed the world would hold Russia and Putin accountable. Biden held a virtual meeting with G7 leaders on Thursday to develop coordinated, severe sanctions on Moscow. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences, Biden said. Every asset they have in America will be frozen. Biden said the sanctions will target Russian banks, oligarchs, state-controlled companies and high-tech sectors, while trying not to disrupt global energy markets. Russian oil and natural gas exports are vital for Europe. Yes, Vladimir Zelensky was suggesting that Biden should remove Russia from the SWIFT banking system. SWIFT payments are a way of transferring money around. And Biden's actually refused to do that. He says it's not necessary to kind of upend the whole banking system. He said the sanctions that we've put in place already are enough to cripple Russia. SWIFT is not, I'm sure Biden's done the research. But of course, Zelensky's panicking a little bit, and he's just wants to throw everything at it. Some analysis of why this conflict is a risk to the global economy. It says just what a vulnerable world economy didn't need: a conflict that accelerates inflation, rattles markets, portends trouble for everyone from European consumers to indebted Chinese developers and families in Africa that face soaring food prices. Russia's attack on Ukraine and retaliatory sanctions from the West may not portend another global recession. The two countries together account for less than 2% of the world's gross domestic product, and many regional economies remain in solid shape, having rebounded swiftly from the pandemic recession. Yet the conflict threatens to inflict severe economic damage on some countries and industries, damage that could mean hardships for millions of people. So there we go. That's the Visalia times Delta. Interesting. I like that. All right, let's go to the Durango Herald next for Colorado. They lead this morning with... Oh, let's say hi to James. James, good morning. Welcome. How are you? Nice to see you back again in California. Stacy says there's some places here in Texas where people are not wearing masks and you have to be extremely careful about that. Well, as long as, the people that are wearing masks are not being criticized or ridiculed by the people that are not wearing them. I mean, that's really the problem, isn't it? When it becomes a symbol of politics, Because that happened very early on in the pandemic where the masks became a political symbol. Okay, Durango Herald, residents want to own, it says. Residents of the Westside Mobile Home Park in West Durango face an uncertain future after learning the park may be sold. They're now exploring whether it's possible to purchase the park themselves, something other mobile home park residents have done in recent years across Colorado in an effort to keep rent prices fixed, build personal equity, and avoid having to move. Interesting. Charity forms to help Ukraine, couple raising money for food, medicine, and supplies. That's wonderful, isn't it? It says when Russians began bombing cities across Ukraine, the people of Ukraine were scared and shocked. Said Vladimir Koshevoy, who works in the Information Technology Department at Fort Lewis College. He said he and his wife are working on putting together a charity to support Ukrainians with food, medicine, and supplies, although it might take 2 or 3 days to get the charity organized, he said. Gas stations across Ukraine are closed and some people can't get gas, he said. Some Ukrainians are trying to drive into Europe because it isn't too long of a drive, and Ukraine is more or less a European country, Koshevoy said. And also, City Council considers tax exemption for menstrual products. A public hearing is scheduled on Wednesday. Well, of course menstrual products should be tax exempt. I mean, the same as diapers. It's just standard. I presume that they were. Interesting. Well, in the UK, women's razors are taxed and men's razors are not taxed. That is crazy. What archaic plan is that? I mean, is that because men need to shave their face for work and women don't need to shave their legs for work? That's so crazy. Durango City Council is holding a public hearing during its regular meeting to consider just that, whether to implement a tax exemption on menstrual care products within the city. The idea of stripping taxes from menstrual products was well received by councillors during a December work session, where the idea was proposed by the Durango Community Relations Commission. At the work session, councillors considered free access to feminine hygiene products at public access city facilities. Why do we even charge for the menstrual products, City Councillor Barbara Noseworthy said in an interview? When they're needed, and you don't always have a quarter. That question evolved into whether the city would consider moving menstrual products from taxation. Well, I just think there are some things that are kind of obvious, right? It's just obvious. Just do it, Okay, next up, we're going to the Orlando Sentinel now. To Florida, the land of the free. Orlando Sentinel leads with Putin orders war in Ukraine, dozens dead as peace in Europe shattered by air-ground assaults on multiple fronts. Same story. Different newspaper. DeSantis has defeated Fauciism. Ha ha ha. Well done, DeSantis, in your hilarious CPAC conference speech. It says, declaring that Fauci has defeated Fauciism and condemning the scientific and technical elite. Governor Ron DeSantis kicked off CPAC in Orlando on Thursday, where some of America's most prominent conservatives have gathered for 4 days of schmoozing and speeches. We need people all over the country to be willing to put on the full armor of God to stand firm against the left, DeSantis said. Oh, that's nice. So now he's militarizing the Lord. Really? I can tell you this, in Florida, we will be standing our ground. We'll be holding that line. We are not going to back down. We've only begun to fight, he said. Yeah, DeSantis really is like a planet all of his own. And House okays the Don't Say Gay legislation. Listen to this. This one's going to frighten the hell out of you. Florida House signed off on culture war measures on Thursday, backed by Ron DeSantis, that seek to combat woke ideology and limit instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. State legislators passed legislation dubbed by opponents the Don't Say Gay bill, along with a bill touted as the Stop Woke Act by DeSantis. The Florida Senate will take up the controversial proposals next. 7 GOP legislators broke ranks with their party and joined Democrats in opposition to the Don't Say Gay bill, including Representatives Chip LaMarca and Representative Renee Placencia of Orlando. Yeah. I mean, a bill that in itself is referred to as Don't Say Gay, the fact that it's been, even though that's a nickname, the fact that that is even a thing, it's just preposterous. And yet there are so many people who are like, yeah. It's beggars belief. Okay, let's go to the Tallahassee Democrat now. See what's happening there. They lead this morning with under attack. Biden, world leaders strongly condemn Putin's actions, oil prices and markets roiled. Well, it's quite a powerful picture. It's very blurry. Looks like it's been taken from a video of military helicopters, apparently Russian, flying over the outskirts of Kiev early on Thursday. Russian troops have launched their anticipated attack on Ukraine. Big explosions were heard before dawn in Kiev, Kharkiv and Odessa, as world leaders decried the Russian actions. I mean, this is, this is fundamentally, the brunt of all of this is the fact that Putin is like keen to get into Kiev as soon as possible, into the capital city, and that fundamentally he wants to kill Volodymyr Zelensky, and he wants to replace him with a Russian sympathetic leader, or just a Russian leader. He's looking for regime change. Ukraine's government said Russian tanks and troops rolled across the border in a full-scale war that could rewrite the geopolitical order and whose fallout already reverberated around the world. In unleashing Moscow's most aggressive action since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, Vladimir Putin deflected global condemnation and cascading new sanctions and chillingly referred to his country's nuclear arsenal. He threatened any foreign country attempting to interfere with consequences you have never seen. That's nuclear talk, that is. So there we go. That's the Tallahassee Democrat this morning. Also, DeSantis Stop Woke Act okayed by House. Same story. Different newspaper. All right, we're whizzing through these this morning. Whizzing. And if you want to get in touch or, criticize, have a say, send a comment, backchannel.tv on your browser. Best place. Okay, let's move on through. The star advertiser for Hawaii now. Fun. Okay, let me just click on this here. Here we go. Star advertiser this morning leads with strikes hit by land, sea, and air. Russia continued its attack on Ukraine one day after it invaded the country by land, sea, and air, killing more than 100 Ukrainian soldiers and civilians and ominously touching off a pitched battle at the highly radioactive area around the Chernobyl nuclear reactor that melted down in 1986. A video verified by the New York Times showed a large explosion in the sky over the outskirts of southern Kiev. Witnesses filmed fiery debris falling over parts of the city, and videos appear to show at least 2 surface-to-air missiles being fired from Kiev before the explosion. Wow. So that means that there could be Russian helicopters or planes being shot down by Ukrainian surface-to-air missiles. Do you know, this is a bit of a digression, but I saw on the internet this morning that someone has posted video of 9/11 that has never been seen before. it was a party happening, I think, on the Hudson or thereabouts, like on a boat party or something. And someone is filming the planes going into the towers from an angle that we have never seen before, completely new. And it was kind of amazing, really. Like, blew my mind. I was like, this is, this is quite shocking because it was so explicit, and you just don't really see. Obviously we have a lot of memories of that period, and we've seen so much grainy footage, but this was clear as day footage of them because they weren't shooting through a window. A lot of it was shot through a window. This is people that were just like on the Hudson looking up. And somebody I know posted it on Twitter and said, I've never seen this before. Has anyone seen this before? And everybody replied saying, this is brand new footage. And they concluded that it was probably some, university professor who was, they were having a reunion, I think, on this boat, and must have shot some VHS footage or something, and then recently just digitized it and put it online. And it was really kind of very explicit and amazing. And it just reminded me, talking about, these types of explosions, that, of course, that really is the only mainland warfare that we have seen here in the United States since forever, the Civil War, I guess. And that's obviously why it had such a profound effect on America and on American people, American culture, American history, was because America was suddenly under attack on the mainland. And that's what's so unique about the United States, based upon its proximity to the rest of Europe. And of course, when we look at the rest of the world, we forget that the world is round sometimes when we look at a map, don't we? We forget the proximity of China to the west coast of America. It wraps around the other side. You forget that you don't want to fall out with China because they're actually pretty close. I mean, admittedly, the China Sea is massive. Is it the China Sea, the one on that side? It's the Pacific, isn't it? Which does it become what does the Pacific become on the other side? I don't know. But it's a vast area of water. You would have to fly for hours. But the point is that it still is, closer than the traditional map would suggest, because it looks like China's all the way over there, and trust me, it's closer than it looks. But you do forget that the globe, the Earth, the planet, the whatever this planet's called, I forget momentarily, is a water planet. We are a water planet. Most of this planet is water. And the little bit of land mass that has appeared up through, millions of years of volcanic eruption created this land in this weird shape of cutouts that looks like someone thought about it, and obviously they didn't. I always used to enjoy the fact that England, where I'm from, used to be attached to mainland Europe. They say that it kind of almost fits to kind of France, and that it basically, as time went on, it kind of moved and drifted, and it became separated. It's only about, how far is it? It's only about like 25 miles or something, isn't it? England from France. It's not that far. You're only under the tunnel for 20 minutes or something, aren't you? If you take a train, you're only in the tunnel for 20 minutes. It's not that far. It's about 20 miles away. I'm sure of it. The actual amount of water, the English Channel. These are questions I'm asking out loud now. It's just like they're coming to me. Oh, how far is England from France? It's like 22 miles or something. EPA launching investigation into Navy's Red Hill fuel facility. This is the head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced on Thursday. He's launching an investigation into Navy Red Hill fuels facility, telling reporters gathered in downtown Honolulu that it's important the agency plays its strong independent role in upholding environmental laws and regulations. He says no family should question the quality of their drinking water. No family should have to worry about whether or not the drinking water is safe for their children or their parents or their grandparents, said EPA Administrator Michael Regan. Yeah. So there we go. That's the star advertiser for Honolulu. Dan has joined us. Good morning, Dan. Doris as well. Hello. Welcome. Nice to see you. Let's go to the Lewiston Tribune now. Another new one on our list for Idaho. And they lead with Russian troops now outside Kiev. Russia pressured its invasion of Ukraine to the outskirts of the capital after unleashing airstrikes on cities and military bases and sending in troops and tanks from 3 sides in an attack that could rewrite the global post-Cold War security order. I mean, the fact that there's an actual physical war with guns and missiles and explosions and tanks, it's just crazy to me that we still are fighting in this way. The same way that we've been fighting for hundreds of years. Because what is the military if it's just not people? People with parents and children and partners and families. It's just more of humanity being destroyed unnecessarily. Explosions sounded before dawn in Kiev as Western leaders scheduled an emergency meeting, and Ukraine's president pleaded for international help. The nature of the explosions was not immediately clear, but the blasts came amid signs that the capital and largest Ukrainian city was increasingly threatened following a day of fighting that left more than 100 Ukrainians dead. Carla, did you find out how far England is from France? Is it 22 miles? Fair enough. It's not that far. It's surprisingly close. It's surprisingly close. You can sail to the Isle of Wight in like 7 minutes. It really is. It's very close. Local educators put Ukraine conflict into perspective. It says as the world watches the Russian attacks against Ukraine that began this week. Professor at Washington State University and the University of Idaho gave preparations on Wednesday, putting the conflict into context and explaining that Russian President Vladimir Putin's motivations, Russia's action in Ukraine should not come as a surprise to anyone who's followed Putin's career. What is this thing doing here? It's driving me crazy. It's in my eye line. There's a whole, lighting, wiry setup. Get rid of that. So, yes, that's interesting, isn't it? Instructors with WSU and UI discussing Putin's motivations. I mean, what is there to know? I mean, the guy has wanted this for ages. It turns out, actually, that Putin, they put out this video of him, making a plan. And, again, they've found out through the metadata that the timestamping was wrong on the video. And that, actually, it was 3 days earlier, which meant that, for 3 days he knew exactly what he was going to do, arguably probably knew it for weeks. And all of this threats and posturing and all this was just like nothing, just buying time just to get enough troops into position. Okay, next up in the Lewiston Tribune, country enjoys brisk 4Q growth. Yes, the U.S. economy ended 2021 by expanding at a brisk 7% annual pace from October through December. The government reported Thursday in a slight upgrade from its earlier estimate as businesses stepped up their restocking of supplies for all of 2021. The nation's gross domestic product, its total output of goods and services, jumped by 5.7%, the fastest calendar year growth since a 7.2% surge in 1984 in the aftermath of a brutal recession. It's great. I mean, considering, all of the craziness that's gone on, the economy is doing remarkably well. Here's a story that we'll be discussing a bit later. Jury convicts officers in Floyd's death. This is 3 former Minneapolis police officers were convicted on Thursday of violating George Floyd's civil rights as a federal jury rejected their arguments that inexperience, improper training, or the distraction of shouting bystanders excuse them from failing to prevent Floyd's killing. I mean, they're just baddies, It's just as simple as that. These people are just baddies. I would love for them to be something else, but it's like, What is it about these people that makes them feel that like that is okay? And it's just their it's just this superiority complex that you have if you're wearing a uniform. It's just too tragic. The uniform, I think, is very dangerous. Really dangerous. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. State may change wolf livestock conflict rules. Interesting. Who is conflicting with the wolves? Is it the humans or livestock and wolves? Is that humans preventing wolves from eating their livestock? I presume it is. I presume. One can only presume. This image of, I'm just looking at this image on the Orlando Sentinel momentarily of a man sitting outside his building near a destroyed car after bombings on the eastern Ukraine town of Shwygiv on Thursday. Russian army forces invaded Ukraine from several directions. And just seeing this guy sitting like with his head in his hands in front of a car that has been completely destroyed. It's just too tragic. You know, you kind of remember these moments. I don't know if this happens to you. Like, I kind of have like moments in my day where I just really remember like how I felt at a certain moment in time. And invariably it's like you know, where you really kind of connect with yourself and be very present with yourself. It's despair, yeah, it's despair. And what are we left with, you know, in these situations? We're just left with my greatest feeling, I think I might have said this yesterday, but my biggest feeling when I look at this is helplessness, you know, because there's not a huge amount we can do from here other than, you know, talk about it. I think, you know, that's kind of what we do, isn't it? We just talk about how this feels and what we want out of it, you know, what we want the end game to look like. And then we pledge our support for whichever side you're on. I mean, tragically, I've watched so much far-right, you know, Republican media in the last couple of days, and they are all rooting for Putin. All of them. They are literally now on Putin's side. They're not even pretending anymore, you know? Fox News has taken Putin's side. All of the right-wing news cable networks have taken Putin's side. Donald Trump has taken Putin's side. Mitch McConnell, not quite, but close enough. And then certainly all of the usual cast of characters in the Republican Party have taken Putin's side, saying he's not such a bad guy. And if Trump was still in charge, this wouldn't have happened. That's just their attitude. Without having any understanding of how Trump was really pivotal in causing a lot of this, creating the atmosphere that enabled this to happen. No, I mean, I don't give him that much credit, but, you know, it's all, there's no one thing that did this, you know, it's like it's a whole combination of things. And what I was saying about it yesterday is that Putin felt like he had control of America when Trump was in charge, right? Because he was basically pulling the strings. And here we are now, a year and a half later, and Putin is out of control. He doesn't have America anymore, you know? Doesn't have that. Just took a photo of this moment in time. Okay, let's jump along next to the Times of Indiana. Is that next? I think it is. Firearms seized is the headline. County cops arrest, detain 56 people, take 66 guns off the streets in fairground sting. Sheriff's Police have a message for patrons of gun shows for the Lake County Fairgrounds. Follow the law or face arrest and prosecution. It's called Operation Scarecrow, confiscating 66 firearms in an undercover sting. Well, that can only be a good thing. I don't know why they don't do more of that. In England they do like gun amnesties and knife amnesties, where they kind of give baddies the opportunity to hand in their weapons. Yes, these 3D printed guns, they're like ghost guns, aren't they? Where people are kind of, basically... Ghost guns are where you can get hold of various different parts from different locations, and there are instructions online as to how to put them together and create a firearm. And the reason they're very dangerous is because A, they're not registered, but B, they obviously go off a lot, and they actually kill the very people that are trying to make them. And then, of course, people with a 3D printer are actually printing guns from scratch. And that's becoming an increasing thing, Okay. U.S. Senator Todd Young, the Republican from Indiana, is calling for the United States to stand with the Ukrainian people by immediately providing additional assistance, including military equipment and lethal aid in the wake of Thursday's invasion by Russia. Vladimir Putin is attacking the democratic rules-based order that has benefited countless Americans and millions around the world since World War II, Young said in a prepared statement. American strength and leadership in this moment is critical, he said. The weak response from the United States following Russia's previous invasions of Georgia and Crimea left Putin undeterred in his perverse ambition of rebuilding the Soviet Union. Hammond Major Thomas McDermott Jr., a Democrat who is seeking to unseat Young during this year's elections, challenged Young's track record when it comes to Russia. He said, "When I'm Indiana's next U.S. Senator, I promise never to shake the hand of a U.S. president who adores dictators," McDermott said in a social media post that includes photos of former President Trump shaking hands with Putin and a smiling Young separately posing with Trump. When will Indiana Senator Todd Young finally denounce Trump's praise for a man who started this war, he wrote. He also issued a statement condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine, stating it not only violates international law but threatens international security. Well, it's like the debate is so immature. It's just such an immature debate. Meh, 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 meh. And it's like, come on, like, unless you're prepared to really invest your time in learning why this happened and all of the, and I don't know enough about it, and I'm first to admit that, I can just do my best with the information I have here. But historically, this is why we turn to experts, And I'm not talking about pundits who go on TV and have an opinion. I'm talking about kind of social historians. And in fact, on one of the networks I used to work for, Sky News, which used to be owned by the Murdochs and is not anymore, they defer all of their historical analysis to one man. They full-time employ a social historian who has terrible clothes, but he stands up on the set every day and talks about what is happening and why, and the consequences and the historical reasons why these things are in place. Because he has spent a lifetime learning about this. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's John someone. But he's brilliant. The guy is brilliant. The way he explains it is brilliant. He's like a history teacher. And so instead of having a whole bunch of pundits on giving a kind of pointless opinion about this, they have one historical, factual voice who is able to communicate at a very high level. And it's beautiful. I'm kind of sick of watching cable news and seeing a whole bunch of people that don't know anything about it give an opinion, and just it infects our minds with all of this kind of mixed message. And the reality is that, history is history. You can't have a warped view of it and say that that's factual. It's a little bit like these Republican states that are desperate to, erase the history of slavery, for example. This is fundamental to the growth and fabric of America. This is why we have police killing civilians these days. It all goes back. It's all part of our history. And yet to kind of just whitewash it conveniently is just very unhealthy. We'll take a look at how Congress is dealing with Ukraine in just a moment. They have their own opinions, so we'll look at that. A few more newspapers and more of your messages. Doris and Dan and Jeffrey have joined us, so thank you very much. We'll talk to you guys after the latest news update from Volley News. It's the US News Update. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And here it is. It's Friday, February 25. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. 3 former Minneapolis police officers were convicted on Thursday of violating George Floyd's civil rights. A federal jury rejected their arguments that inexperience, improper training, or the distraction of shouting bystanders excused them from failing to prevent Floyd's killing. Tu Tao, J. Alexander Kueng, and Thomas Lane were convicted of depriving Floyd of his right to medical care as the 46-year-old black man pinned under fellow officer Derek Chauvin's knee for 9.5 minutes while handcuffed face down on the street on May 25, 2020. Kueng knelt on Floyd's back, Lane held his legs, and Tao kept bystanders back. Tao and Kueng were also convicted of failing to intervene to stop Chauvin in the videotaping that sparked protests in Minneapolis and around the globe as part of a reckoning over racial injustice. George Floyd's nephew, Brandon Williams, said he hopes the verdicts would change laws and policies to protect people from these situations. He also said the outcome sends a message that says if you murder or use excessive deadly force, there's consequences that follow. Meanwhile, demonstrators in several major US cities protested the invasion of Ukraine on Thursday, calling on Russian President Vladimir Putin to halt the missile and troop assault as US President Joe Biden announced new sanctions against Russia. Despite freezing temperatures, hundreds of protesters in Manhattan marched to the Russian mission to the United Nations, some cloaked in Ukrainian flags and chanting, "Stop the war" and "Stop Russia now." New York City has the largest Ukrainian community in the United States. Your daily US News Update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. He's very good, isn't he? I don't know who he is. Very good, very efficient, doesn't waste any words, just gets on with it, gets down to it. So yeah, that's the US News Update. It's a podcast by the people behind Backchannel. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to Backchannel. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show. It's 2 minutes after 10 on the West Coast here, 2 minutes after 1 Eastern, the 25th of February 2022. I'm Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show. You're welcome to get in touch in the usual way by waking up your Alexa device, saying the word "say" and then your message. You can also go to backchannel.tv, which is a kind of chat facility, and you can message me there as well. So Congress wants to spend more money to help Ukraine's military fend off Russia. Maybe too late for any new cash to make a difference, President Joe Biden during televised remarks on Thursday. I think I might have hiccups now. As Vlad, I think it's because I ate some salmon on bagels at high speed this morning. You know, what a delicious way to start the day. During televised remarks on Thursday, Biden announced that Putin had bombarded Ukraine. He didn't outline plans to ask Congress for additional authorities of funding as his administration begins imposing harsh sanctions on Russia's economy and continues sending weapons to Kiev. And many on Capitol Hill seem content allowing the White House to dictate the U.S. response to the ongoing assault. The resulting dynamic over additional aid to Ukraine could end up where the debate over sanctioning Russia did before lawmakers left Washington last week, with a bipartisan appetite to do more to counter Putin, but little consensus on specifics. I mean, I do find that this is a thing with the GQP a lot, you know, this kind of desire to have an opinion, and actually when it comes to it, they don't vote in the same way as they've been posturing. There's no detail, there's no action. It's all just opinion, shout it, then run away in the opposite direction. It's just kind of how it is. It says if the Biden administration asks for additional legislation, congressional leaders are prepared to move quickly, but some lawmakers don't want to wait for Biden's blessing before passing new legislation that could sanction Russia as punishment for its violent campaign while boosting Ukraine's military and sending it needing humanitarian assistance. Senator Chris Coons, the Democrat from Delaware who chairs the Appropriations Subcommittee on the State Department and Foreign Relations, told reporters on Friday morning that any supplemental funding bill would likely exceed $10 billion, the majority of which would go towards humanitarian aid to address the impending refugee crisis in Europe. Those who want to help Ukraine further as soon as possible, Democrats and Republicans alike, are pointing to Biden's acknowledgements on Thursday that the sanctions he and the U.S. allies have outlined so far won't do much to deter Putin's behavior in the short term. Lindsey Graham said if we're not doing anything possible, we aren't doing enough. Oh, everything possible, we aren't doing enough. Time is not on our side, Graham said, as he told the Biden administration an emergency spending bill for Ukraine will get broad bipartisan support, and that the Senate should pass such a bill next week when members return to Washington. Jim Risch of Idaho, the top Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee, agreed that what is appropriate won't be hard to settle on under the current circumstances. And there's notable bipartisan agreement on going further than the Biden administration has so far. Isn't it interesting how there is zero bipartisan agreement on any domestic policies? But when it comes to military action, warfare, they're all in agreement. What does that say to you? They won't agree on voting rights. They won't give bipartisan support to voting rights so that America has a free vote at the ballot box. Yet they will happily send $10 billion to Ukraine to enable Ukraine to maintain its ability to vote freely. What does that say? This refusal to have any bipartisan agreement on anything that is domestic. I just don't understand them. You know, it's like I just cannot. I try so hard to understand the motivation. I mean, I guess what it must be is that supporting humanitarian aid and $10 billion for, you know, whatever is sent to Ukraine is not going to harm Biden. So they're behind that. But anything domestic policy-wise will fundamentally harm Biden, and that's what they want to do. Just harm Biden. I mean, maybe it just boils down to men and guns. You know? Men and their guns. They love the guns. They love the weapons, the big guns. And to them, you know, to get into a fight is exciting. They might claim that it's a terrible thing, but fundamentally they're like, yeah, war. Men and their guns. On Thursday, the US ramped up its sanctions to include additional Russian banks and critical industries, but Senate Foreign Relations Chair Bob Menendez called for an escalation that would kick Russia out of the SWIFT global banking system, even as Biden said that such a proposal faces opposition from some European nations while aiming to sanction Putin himself. In addition, Democrats and Republicans who attended the Munich Security Conference issued a statement ahead of Russia's offensive that vowed to help pass whatever emergency supplemental legislation will best support our NATO allies and the people of Ukraine. But when it comes to an emergency weapons resupply for Ukraine, some lawmakers are openly skeptical. Their concerns are compounded by Congress's usual slow pace, as well as the Senate's inability to agree on a comprehensive deterrent sanctions package before Russia invaded. Legislation that would have included a significant increase in lethal military aid. I mean, it's all very well saying, what if that, and what if this, and what if we'd have done that, and, you know, it's like we were talking about stocks and shares yesterday, you know, should I have sold my shares before the war, and all that type of stuff. You know, it's like, what if? What you say and what you do are two different things, and we can't predict everything, otherwise we'd all be millionaires. So we have to just do our best with what we're given, the information we have at the time. This is what humanity is. It's about a series of decisions based on circumstance. That's just what humanity is. And hindsight is a wonderful thing. And so we are making history. History is being made based upon these decisions that are being announced. And I watched Biden's speech in full yesterday, and I was genuinely impressed by it. I don't enjoy it when he answers questions. I don't think he's particularly good at that. But I thought his speech was very eloquent. Bernie Sanders actually posted a 5-minute speech on Twitter of him talking to the camera. Now, Bernie Sanders, as you know, is 126. That guy did not make a single mistake. Like, my job is like to talk for a living. I probably couldn't talk for like 5.5 minutes like Bernie Sanders did into the camera and not make a single mistake. He was word perfect. I presume he was using a teleprompter. But it was like, you know, why are people critical of mature people, you know, who bring all this experience and wisdom? Why? You know, the guy knows exactly what he's talking about. It was one of the most eloquent deliveries. I actually retweeted it and I said, Byrne gives a concise explanation of the Ukraine-Russia crisis and doesn't make a single mistake. We have that in British politics as well. You know, we kind of ignore the old guard and just toss them aside like they're just old school. And the reality is that if they've lived through decades and periods of history, you know, history repeats itself all the time. You need people that have experienced this. What, the Western culture of dismissing the elderly? Yeah, we do. It's like old people are out of fashion. You know? I choose to go for dinner in restaurants where old people are eating at, like, you know, 5:30, where you can smell the urine in the restaurant. You know, like that's my kind of that's my kind of dinner, you know? The Blue Rinse Brigade, you know, the golden hour. Just to be in the company of more mature people, you know? That's true. When you see old people holding hands, it's kind of magical, isn't it? I have a 95-year-old step grandmother. And she still has a boyfriend. And I'm going to be very careful how I say this, but they are still active. What do you think to that? Because she tells us all the time. That's how I know. She tells us. She's a very, very sexual woman. And the age is irrelevant to her. You know, she talks about it all the time. And I feel sorry for John. John is actually 25 years her junior. And they've been doing it for years. And here's the interesting angle of this story. Correct. John is 25 years younger than her. She's 95. She was born the same year as Her Majesty the Queen, Elizabeth II. And do you want to know the real kind of twist in the story? John is married. That's the twist. John is married. She's been the mistress for for 30 years. Still at it. Still doing the business. I mean, there's hope for all of us, isn't there? When you hear a story like that, it gives all of us hope. I don't know how we got onto this after talking about Ukraine. I just have no idea how that happened. How on earth did we make that connection? I'm going to have to watch this back and find out how that happened. How on Lord's earth did... I'm just looking through the script to see what on earth in this script suggests. We were talking about old people. I can't remember, but that was like a magical moment. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes this program is just like, it's such a surreal experience for me. To sit here and kind of, it's like being in therapy, but like this kind of stream of consciousness. I hope you're appreciating this. I'm giving a lot of myself here and of my elderly step-grandmother. Jeffrey, Dan, and Doris, thank you for joining us. Doris is a wonderful name, isn't it? It kind of conjures up all sorts of, joyful thoughts from years gone by. James, my Hatchimals, Beckett, Kenneth, Oliver, Spencer, Anthony, Bobby, Stacey, and Michael, thank you all of you for hanging around and enjoying Backchannel today as we discuss Grandma. We're looking at how Congress wants to spend more money to help Ukraine's military fend off Russia. It may be too late for any new cash to make a difference, they say. When it comes to an emergency weapons resupply for Ukraine, some lawmakers are openly skeptical. Their concerns are compounded by Congress's usual slow pace, as well as the Senate's inability to agree on a comprehensive deterrent sanctions package before Russia invaded, legislation that would have included a significant increase in lethal military aid. So furnishing the Ukrainian military with more equipment may only go so far in the face of the Russian invasion that launched overnight. House Armed Services Chair Adam Smith cautioned on Thursday. He said, "I don't think it's realistic to think that we're going to be able to reinforce them enough in the short term to repel the invasion. We do need to try and help them as much as possible, and it's quite possible that what we're looking at here is more of a long-term insurgency." Other potential provisions that could get added to a Ukrainian aid bill are floating around the Hill. Graham has pushed for the creation of a task force to target Russian oligarchs worldwide, many of whom have enriched themselves from their closeness with Putin. The Biden administration and some European nations have already started seeking ways to punish those individuals financially or otherwise. So it's so hard, isn't it? Because we're talking about a war that we, as Americans, are not directly involved in. We don't have boots on the ground. We are supporting and align with our NATO alliance. So, it's quite complex. Like, what can you do? Like, how much can you give? Because, there's been talk of, like, Americans sending equipment and having, to the border, and then having Ukrainians pull those things by hand over the border. This is like how you get round this argument of arming the Ukrainian military. You deliver equipment to the border and then you just have it dragged over the border by the Ukrainians. It's interesting. If you want to message me, then you can do so in the usual way. You know how to do that. Just wake up your device, say the word say, and then your message if you're using an Echo Show. You can also go to backchannel.tv. Another great place to spend your time. What remains unclear, though, is whether such legislation is going to gain momentum anytime soon. With Congress on a planned recess this week, some lawmakers are calling for quicker action. Representative Eliza Slotkin said national security committees should cobble together a bipartisan package before Biden's State of the Union address on Tuesday. The top Republican on the House Armed Services Committee, Alabama Representative Mike Rogers, said in a statement that lawmakers should return to D.C. early to vote on GOP-backed sanctions legislation that would give Kiev millions of dollars in new foreign financing. I don't know. I'm the first to say I just don't know enough about it. You know, I've not lived in the U.S. when there's been a military action like this to know how the U.S. would respond. You know, this is a new territory for me, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people, because, you know, this type of warfare is just very, very rare, very unusual. And obviously we're used to Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, those were theaters of war that we had become, just kind of had worked its way into our culture. We kind of understood what was happening there. The military there, you know, certainly American troops being more a peacekeeping force. And NATO obviously is a peacekeeping force. But it's NATO supporting the Ukrainians in this case. So what does a NATO military look like? And how will it evolve? Because we have to remember it's not going to stay like this. You know, the way it is happening currently, eventually the Ukrainian military will be depleted. And the Russians do have a significant supply of weapons. Yeah, this is why the surrounding regions and countries are going to have to kind of, you know, probably, unfortunately, get involved at some point. And this is why you're going to end up when people referring to World War III, well, that is, you know, that it has the potential for that. And that's why it's so important that Putin is being diminished financially, because he might be one of the richest men in the world, but the way that he distributes his wealth, you know, with oligarchs all around the world, if their bank accounts are being frozen, then that means that Putin's money is frozen. And I'm interested to know, like, how much of Putin's money is Kremlin money, you know, if the two are connected, or if, because I actually thought the Kremlin was potentially quite poor, and yet Putin himself was quite rich. You know, he'd basically diverted all of the riches to himself. He keeps his people in poverty. You know, this is what people fail to understand about Russians and the lives that they live, is that he maintains a status quo where the Russians rely on him. Carla, do you know the thing he does about commodities, where he like basically prevents bread from being available for a period so that people can't get basic food supplies? And then he basically stops the production, and then he kind of talks about it, and then he starts up the production again, and then tries to take the credit of bringing bread back to society. This is like the crazy mind tricks he plays on his own people. Manipulates the food supply. The guy is nuts. Like, he really is kind of, yeah, it's crazy. He forces people to queue for stuff, you know, like there's images that have gone around the world of people lining up in Russia to get supplies. And it's because Putin controls the supply chain. Turns it on, turns it off. If he feels that his poll rating is going down, turns it off so that he can turn it back on again and he can win the support of the Russian people. He's a manipulator. Doesn't care when he talks about safety and freedom and democracy and trying to liberate the Ukrainian people from a Nazi regime. What Nazi regime? He's the Nazi regime. Ukraine is a free, democratically elected country. They elected a comedian who impersonated the former president because that's how they were feeling, and fine, so be it. If that's what you want, Zelensky has turned out to be a reasonably decent guy, and a very brave guy. The fact that he's staying in Kiev with his family right now, when, anybody else would have fled by now. If it was Trump, he'd be gone, Run away, run away. If you want to talk about this, then you're welcome. Dan, Jeffrey, Doris, you're welcome to chat. Oh, we should talk about Ketanji Brown Jackson, of course, the new potential DC, well, she's a DC Circuit Court of Appeals judge who was ratified by Republicans. And now they've already come out and saying that, she will be scrutinized. It's so ridiculous. They voted for her. Racism is going to become a big factor in Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson being awarded this role. There's going to be a lot of racist posturing here. This is where we're going to see the true colors of the Republican Party. It's already started. The race baiting has already started in the debate this morning. Anyway, the plan is to have her succeed retiring Justice Stephen Breyer, making history picking a black woman for the nation's highest court. In a message posted on Twitter, Biden called Jackson one of our nation's brightest legal minds and said she will be an exceptional justice. Jackson was long considered the leading contender for the post, particularly after Biden elevated her last year from the trial court bench to the appeals court, seen as second in power only to the Supreme Court. Jackson is popular with liberal legal activists looking to replace Breyer with a justice willing to engage in ideological combat with the court's conservatives, who now hold a formidable 6-justice majority. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, that the court is stacked so far to the right? And it's crazy for someone like me, coming from a country where we have apolitical justices, to know that the court is even political in the first place. Is it possible for Americans to be apolitical? Like, just to be an American, to be a proud American, and to have a non-political view. I'm not talking about a libertarian view or centrist or moderate. I'm talking about be apolitical. Like, to make decisions legally based on the law without having a political slant. Is that possible? I'd like to think so. Carla, in England, do we ever truly question how apolitical the Supreme Court is? Because the problem is you have a lot of old white men who are justices, and invariably they're conservatives. But do we think that... I just think that judges in the UK are trained to be apolitical. There's a huge amount of trust in the British legal system, both in the High Court and the Supreme Court. It's like, the British legal system and justice system has been a bastion of truth and partisan, non-partisanship since forever. And they kind of have made that work, But England is a very progressive country compared to America. It's a very liberal country compared to America. It just is. It says, because of her diverse and broad public service, Judge Jackson has a unique appreciation of how critical it is for the justice system to be fair and impartial. With multiple law enforcement officials in her family, she also has a personal understanding of the stakes of the legal system, a posting on the White House website said. Among Jackson's selling points with left-leaning lawyers in 2019, she authored an unsparing opinion rejecting former President Donald Trump's sweeping claims of executive privilege in the House's investigation into Trump's dealings with Ukraine. Stated simply, the primary takeaway from the past 250 years of recorded American history is that presidents are not kings, Jackson wrote, as she ruled against the Justice Department's argument that Trump White House counsel Don McGahn was free to ignore a House subpoena at Trump's direction. And just 2 months ago, Jackson joined a momentous D.C. Circuit decision that turned down Trump's effort to block his White House records from being disclosed to a House committee investigating the storming of the Capitol on January the 6th. Born in Washington and raised in South Florida, Jackson would, if confirmed, become the third African-American to serve on the Supreme Court. Her nomination also fulfills a campaign promise by Biden to select an African-American woman as a justice. Jackson emerged as Biden's top choice during a month-long search process that reportedly involved the president interviewing at least 3 women jurists: Jackson, South Carolina federal judge Michelle Childs, and California Supreme Court Justice Leondra Kruger. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell reacted to the White House's announcement by deriding Jackson's qualifications and painting her as the thrall of liberals angry about the High Court's conservative bent. He said, "I voted against confirming Judge Jackson." I won't do it all because it's too much for me. But to her current position less than a year ago, just imagine like a frog talking. Since then, I understand that she has published a total of 2 opinions, both in the last few weeks, that one of her prior rulings was just reversed by a unanimous panel of her present colleagues of the D.C. Circuit, McConnell said. Some conservatives and moderates hoped that if Biden was choosing from the 3 women widely seen as finalists, he would pick Childs. At least one prominent senator expressed strong disappointment on Friday after word emerged that Jackson would get the nod. I mean, I'm very pleased about this. They're furious because Jackson is the most progressive of the candidates, and that, you know, it's necessary because the court is stacked in favor of conservatives. You need an outspoken liberal justice to counterbalance that, because unless someone is going to pass away or retire, these are jobs for life. Imagine doing a job for life. Like, imagine. Asa's joined us. Abby, welcome to Backchannel. Excuse me, I think I have hiccups today. I think something's going on. You know, whatever it is. There's salmon in the air, put it that way. It's 10:30 here on the West Coast, 1:30 Eastern, and welcome to Backchannel. Welcome to Backchannel. You can message me at backchannel.tv. 3 ex-Minneapolis policemen present at the death of George Floyd denied the unarmed black man of his civil rights, a jury has found. Let's take a look at this story. It's very important. It's interesting, isn't it, how this, you know, it's like a couple of years on from the death of George Floyd, and still court cases continue to bring some justice to this story, to bring closure to this story. This is not Derek Chauvin. These are the 3 other officers who were with him. They were charged with showing deliberate indifference to Mr. Floyd's serious medical needs during the attempted arrest in May 2020. Tu Tao is one of them, 36 years of age. J. Alexander Quang is 28. And Thomas Lane is 38. All testified in their own defense in the trial. They said they did not realize Mr. Floyd needed medical care at the time. Really? Someone leant on his neck for 9.5 minutes. I mean, you just would have thought maybe that you might know that is... You know that, I mean, the crazy thing is that move that Derek Chauvin pulled on George Floyd is taught in police training. They teach people how to do that. It is a known tactic to kneel on the neck of somebody in the state of Minneapolis. Not to do it excessively or endlessly so that they eventually pass away, but it is a tactic nonetheless. It wasn't just Derek Chauvin thinking, oh, well, I'll just lean on this guy's neck. It's like, that's what he does. He leans on people's necks to keep them down. Like, wow. How many other people's necks did Derek Chauvin lean on with his knee to, in order to apprehend them, who didn't die but nearly died? That would be interesting to know. Violating a person's civil rights carries various punishments, but prosecutors have recommended 25 years in federal prison for each man. Derek Chauvin, the former police officer who was filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, is currently serving a 22-and-a-half-year sentence. Chauvin was found guilty of Mr. Floyd's murder last April. He also pleaded guilty in December to his own federal civil rights charges as part of the plea agreement. Video footage of the arrest shows Quang and Lane assisting Chauvin by helping to hold Mr. Floyd down. Tao, meanwhile, kept concerned bystanders away. Over 4 weeks of testimony, prosecutors argued that human decency and common sense should have compelled the men to take action and prevent Mr. Floyd's death. It wasn't a split-second use of force like a gunshot. Not 30 seconds, not a minute, several minutes. 569 seconds, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Manda Sertich. But lawyers for the defense claimed they were listening to a commander with seniority. Chauvin was a field training officer to both Lane and Quang. When asked why he did not tell Chauvin to get his knee off Mr. Floyd's neck, Officer Tao testified, "I think I would trust a 19-year-old veteran to figure it out." A 12-person jury deliberated for around 13 hours before returning their verdict on Thursday. In June, the trio of defendants will be back, this time in state court, to face criminal charges for aiding and abetting Chauvin's actions. I mean, I think a lot of things about this, but the thing that I think that's the most important, I can't lean back too much anymore with this light behind me. I think I might knock it over. The old days of me reclining and going into some kind of chitty chat are over. I have to be bolt upright these days. The thing that I think is the most important part of this whole thing, and maybe, George Floyd did not die in vain, because the movement, the civil rights movement that has snowballed off the back of this murder, this execution, this public execution that was filmed on video for the whole world to see, for every mural that has been painted on every wall of George Floyd's face, of every name graffitied on walls of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement painted in giant yellow letters along the Washington Boulevard. This is all because of one man who died at the hands of a white supremacist. And I really genuinely feel that George Floyd's death instigated a civil rights movement on a level never seen before, way bigger than the Martin Luther King movement of the late 50s and 60s. Way bigger than that. Because back then it was mainly black people marching for black people. And now it's everybody marching for black people. Now when you see the makeup of the people protesting, of going on these BLM marches, of chanting George Floyd's name, it's of all shades, of all races and creeds and colors and faiths and nationalities. And it's happening all around the world, not just in America. George Floyd's name is everywhere now. It's in every single country. The impact of that moment, of that bystander that filmed that video, that captured the horrific and horrendous behavior of a police officer that clearly happens all around America, where we see the evil in the eyes of somebody who thinks that it's their legal rights to execute another person in public. And so the BLM movement and the George Floyd movement has ricocheted around the globe, to the point that I honestly believe that George Floyd did not die in vain, because the movement has had huge impact. Huge impact. And it's brought civil rights and human rights back to the forefront of debate in America. And it didn't happen. It didn't even happen enough under Obama. You had the first black president of the United States who won 2 terms, 8 years, and was constantly blocked after the first 2 years, was constantly blocked and literally couldn't do enough. And Obama, if you read his book, has said himself that it was difficult for him as a person to be the one to move, to push the civil rights movement forward. Because whilst he was a black president in office, there was a lot of people that were against that were unhappy about that. And so actually, despite his power, he was not best placed to be the person to do it. And isn't it interesting that George Floyd has kind of indirectly, he's done it. Somebody who you could argue is at the opposite social spectrum to Obama. Somebody who was inadvertently paying with a fake $20 bill to buy cigarettes in a store. And Obama, with his huge success now and riches and books and podcasts and legacy, wasn't able to do what George Floyd was able to do. And I guess, for me, that is really an example of how humanity is allowed to express itself and why we mustn't fear the likes of Vladimir Putin. Because there are more people, regular people, 41 million of them in Ukraine, against one man. This is the power of people, the collective power of people. This is how the George Floyd can mobilize an entire generation. And the right wing, the far right, the Republicans, whatever you want to call them, they criticized George Floyd at the time, didn't they? They called him a druggie and a drug addict and a criminal and all sorts of things. That they just cannot accept that humans are humans, no matter what they might have been through, what struggles they might have, what addictions they might be facing, what personal problems they have. We are all the same. We all have parents, or have had parents at some point, and we are all just trying to do our best. And not all of us are equipped to become the next president of the United States. Obama knows that, talked about it all the time. Gave a generation hope, a sense that they could be whoever they want to be. And young black kids looked up to Obama and thought, wow, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's the legacy of Barack Obama. And hopefully that will be the legacy also of a Supreme Court justice who is a black female. And if it's possible, because I worry that, it's going to be difficult for Ketanji Brown Jackson to get, sign off from the Senate. I worry that the Republicans will try and block her election. But I feel like the more people, black people, who can take positions of high office, whether it be in the judiciary or in politics, the more chance we have in the future of seeing a greater level of equality and equity in society. Because, we need role models. We all need role models. And while the Republicans are going to moan about Jackson, they will never use the argument that a young girl growing up now in Atlanta might see her in her judge's robes and think, if she can do it, then so can I. They will ignore that argument, the importance of that argument. In the same way that the people who ignore George Floyd, and why George Floyd was put on this earth, and maybe he was put on this earth to die for the civil rights movement, who knows? Who knows why any of us are put here? Hi, Tracy. Hi, Jeffrey. Welcome to Backchannel. Nice to see you. I'm Anthony. We're just talking about the civil rights movement and how it's connected to the death of George Floyd. This is after 3 ex-Minneapolis policemen have been have been convicted after they denied the unarmed black man of his civil rights, a jury has found. And then also kind of cross-referencing that with the conversation about the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson as Biden's nominee to replace Justice Stephen Breyer. And talking about the importance of these moments in the history of America. And how in adversity, in the case of George Floyd, some good will be done. I mean, you could argue, and I don't know, this is like quite tenuous, but maybe there is some truth to it, that if George Floyd hadn't have died, it might not have been so essential for Biden to nominate a black female to the Supreme Court. Because that feeling that we all have, that feeling that connects us all, of injustice, police brutality. How do you right the wrong of a white man killing a black man on the street? You go to the very highest court, to the Supreme Court, and you place a black female onto the bench in the hope that she will be able to prevent future George Floyd-style executions. I mean, is that possible? As I said to you, it's a tenuous stretch. But my point is, it's all part of that movement where there is more heat, there is more eyes, there is more focus on the need to address the balance, the imbalance of the white man being supreme. You know, there's a reason why it's called the Supreme Court and why it traditionally was made up of white men, you know, expressing their white supremacy as supremists and their whiteness, maintaining the order to make sure that the black man never was able to rise up to any great heights and remained owned and in slavery. And yet, you know, over time that has changed. Of course, you know, there are some anomalies. You have Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court, who is a black man who is one of the most right-wing people you'll ever come across. And he's married to a white woman who is very much on the far right with her views. And there was this piece I read, was it in The Atlantic or something a few weeks ago, suggesting that is Clarence Thomas's wife the most influential person on the Supreme Court. She's not a justice, but she has the ear of her husband. And considering all of the civil rights atrocities that has happened over decades, I'm amazed that there can be a black man on the Supreme Court who is so right-wing in his views. Doesn't make sense to me, considering the persecution of black people in the United States historically. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, maybe someone can explain it to me. But, you know, I struggle with that. It just doesn't make sense. But then again, I have friends and people I've come across. One African-American springs to mind who's like, doesn't believe in BLM. Thinks that the Black Lives Matter movement is just woke garbage. And this is a black woman who just can't get on board with it. So I recognize that there are all opinions, and it's not just my kind of liberal wokist attitude that is important here. It's everybody has a right to a view, and there are plenty of black people who do not buy into the BLM movement because they don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be highlighted. They just want to get on with their lives and live amongst society without being spotlit. There are people who are not connected, who are black but don't feel connected to the George Floyd murder. They can't have empathy for it and they don't feel connected to it. In the same way as there is Jews who don't feel any connection to the Holocaust. You know, you choose where you want to sit and how you want history to affect you. You have that choice. That is your free right. That is your free speech, your First Amendment right, whatever you want to choose to call it. And my views are very nuanced. They are all over the place. I'm not one way or another. I'm not particularly conservative. I mean, in some ways, when I go shopping, I certainly don't spend money on my clothes. But I do genuinely feel that, we always have to do more. We have to go further than we think because there are always people left behind. And I've always found it fascinating that, in America, we never talk about the poor. The poor are so ignored, and how poverty is not a word that Americans ever use. And yet where I'm from in England, we talk about poverty and the poor all the time because we are a very poor country in terms of people that live, day to day. Yeah, people with disabilities in America, I mean, the fact they still call them handicapped is just so depressing to me. It's the phrase that's used all the time. Just like, really? You seriously saying that now? Handicap parking spaces, they say. Really? So my point is that, because not enough is done, we need to push further. We need to push beyond the point of what is considered normal, because stuff's always going to be rolled back. So you push for more legislation knowing it's going to be pared back. You push for more funding because you know it's going to be pared back. You push for more equality because you know it's going to be pared back. And of course, it's Black History Month, and we'll spend the last 5 minutes talking about Alice Coachman. Because, segregation prevented Georgia-born Alice Coachman from competing on sports teams as a teen. But she didn't let that quash her dreams and love of running. Training on her own, she was eventually offered a scholarship in the Tuskegee Institute in 1939. She continued to win races and break records in amateur athlete union competitions. In 1948, she finally got her chance to compete in the Olympics. The 1940 and 1944 games were cancelled due to World War II, and her record-breaking high jump made her the first African-American woman to win Olympic gold. She retired from competing and went back to school at Albany State, and in 1952 she became the first African-American man or woman to revive an endorsement deal when Coca-Cola chose her as a spokesperson. It's amazing, isn't it, that would happen? Yeah, I mean, I would love to see her kind of speaking up for Coca-Cola and see what that looked like. It was kind of pre-television, I guess, so I don't know if it was TV commercials, but maybe she was on a billboard or something. Oh, Coca-Cola's from Atlanta, yeah. I have a very strange relationship with Coca-Cola. As in the drink. When I was younger, I used to, because I never really drank much alcohol, but always order a Diet Coke, always. And when I learned more about its ingredients, I kind of ended up, stopping and switching out for water, just water from the tap. But I do see people drinking full-fat Coke all the time. And I'm like, wow. It's how many scoops of sugar is that? Isn't it it's half a pound of sugar in a Coca-Cola. It really is an absolutely huge amount of sugar. Yeah, people drink it all day, don't they? Just keep popping those cans. Would just never occur to me to buy fizzy pop. It just would never occur to me. In the same way that it would never occur to me to go and get a coffee. Just would never go and get a coffee. If I was meeting somebody and we were going to chat and something, then maybe I would get a coffee. But hardly ever. Would never get a coffee. I'm a tea drinker, but I would also never go and get a tea because tea in shops is horrible. Tea at home is the best tea. No one makes a tea like you make a tea. So anyway, we've been commemorating and celebrating Black History Month and talking for the last, because we've only got a couple more days left to do Black History Month, but I suppose, it doesn't have to stop us because February is ending. Oh, Don has joined us. Hello, Don, Dawn, Jeffrey, Tracy, Asa, Abby, Dan, Doris, James. My Hatchimals has been around for a while. Beckett, Kenneth, Oliver, Spencer, Anthony, Bobby, Stacey, and Michael. Thank you for joining us here on Backchannel. If you have any suggestions for anybody that we could talk about in Black History Month or beyond Black History Month, then of course you're welcome to send them through, backchannel.tv. You can message us that way, or just wake up your Alexa device and just say the word "say" and then your message. We've been celebrating today Alice Coachman. The segregation-prevented Georgia-born Alice Coachman from competing on a sports team as a teen, but she didn't let that quash her dreams and love of running. And finally got her chance to compete in the Olympics, and her record-breaking high jump made her the first African-American woman to win Olympic gold. I've been to Atlanta, Georgia. Well, I've been to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, where there was a very good Martin Luther King exhibition in the terminal, which I spent some time looking at. The home of the civil rights movement. And I've just discovered the home of Coca-Cola as well. And CNN. Really? Also, Delta Airlines is based out of Atlanta, Georgia. That's the home base for Delta. So, yeah, we should not dismiss these places. I've really enjoyed you today. Thank you very much. Hopefully you've enjoyed me too. It's the 25th of February, 2022. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and we'll do it again. Have another chance to, have some nice chats. And join me at night. No, not tomorrow, because tomorrow's Saturday. So join me Monday at 9 a.m. Stay with Backchannel for your pal Hal. He's next.